don't see Brian. Matt, you want to tote the microphone around? Or Aaron? Aaron, grab the microphone. I'm just going to issue orders. You were a Marine. That's how that works, right? We should be Amish. It was all about that bass. Just recite the Amidah, and by the time you're at the end, he'll be ready.
Hello. Here we go. Did you? Hello. I'm booming the
At least everybody's awake now.
Yeah, right? I believe I have some volume. Anybody got questions? Oh, okay. I got you.
I knew it. We just have starting here.
Oh,
He asked it.
I know, I don't see Brian. Brian's always got good questions.
He left.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. He didn't look so great.
all right. It looks like the question from Ryan online is, if one person receives an insight from another's gift of the Spirit, in parentheses, and then turns around, casts that edification off onto others as a spoken message for them, is this okay?
I had to ask for a little clarity on the question. I'm a little unclear on. The question is, would you go ahead and read it again?
Sure. If one person receives an insight from another's gift of the Spirit, and then turns around, casts that edification off onto others as a spoken message for them, is this okay?
I think, and this could just be speculation, either way, it'll buy time and get clarified. I mean, it's saying that if you give them an identity and point that or to give that to them to do that,
Well, yeah. So the gifts of the Spirit, which is another topic we'll have to cover at some point. Hey, sermon material. There's different giftings, right? Different people have different gifts, and the gifts are to be used for building up the body.
She says, I think he's saying if someone speaks in tongues, another interprets, is it okay for them to act as it is a personal message for the interpreter? Sorry.
So if I'm going to try to speak that back to you, and you let me know what I missed. A message, so we're talking about a personal revelation spoken in a different tongue, which is then interpreted. The message was intended for one person or a whole congregation? Is that the question?
That is, I don't know if that was clarified. If someone speaks in tongues, another interprets, is it okay for them to?
I could have just brought my phone up here.
Would you like me to stand next to you?
You gotta get your 15 minutes. Go along.
I'm not 100% on that. We at least have these clarification. Oh.
Yeah, give me just a second. I tune into myself. Ironic. Well, I will if it loads. There we go. Okay.
If you'd
Someone
like.
speaks in tongues, another interprets. Is it okay for them to act as if it's a personal message for the interpreter? From what I gather from Paul's writings about how speaking in other tongues is supposed to work, is that it's for the purpose of it is that it is interpreted for the body, right? So let's see. Will be 1 Corinthians. Is it 12 or 14? 14. Yeah, for the one who speaks in a tongue speaks not to people but to God, for no one understands, but in the Spirit he speaks mysteries. But the one who prophesies speaks to people for building up, urging on, and uplifting. One who speaks in a tongue builds up himself, but the one who prophesies builds up the community. Now I want you all to speak in tongues, but even more that you would prophesy. One who prophesies is greater than one who speaks in tongues, unless he interprets, so that the community may be built up. Yeah, so if this is a public occurrence, shall we say, as in a person speaking in a tongue in public, Paul's concern, and really it's his concern throughout this whole section of 1 Corinthians, is things being done in order. If somebody stands up and they say something, and you have no idea what they've said, and you just leave it there, then that's disorderly, right? Nobody's edified. Nobody's built up by hearing something they don't understand. Let's see. Can you then take a public... Okay, I think I understand the question now. So somebody stands up, speaks in tongues. Somebody else stands up and gives an interpretation before the assembly. Can you take that as saying, okay, well, that was about me, personally? I don't see a precedent for that. Because the only thing that I can really see from tongues, we have the events in Acts, which were assigned for all the people that spoke different languages and all. And you have Paul's comments here in 1 Corinthians 14, which is really about the building up of the community. Again, his concern is things being done in order. If it's disorderly, it's not good for the community. If it's somebody building up themselves at the, I don't want to say the expense of the community, but to me, it doesn't seem like it's going to work that way in the assembly. If it's a gift from the Spirit to be used in the assembly, it's for building up the assembly. That's basically Paul's whole theology of gifts. Right? He even says in verse 12, likewise with you, since you are zealous for spiritual gifts, keep trying to excel. But why? Right? He says, for the building up of the community. Therefore, let one who speaks in a tongue pray that he may interpret. But again, this is corporate language, and I would advise you to go back through 1 Corinthians 14 and see if you can find something in there that is an encouragement of somebody to do this thing just for themselves or on a private, sort of personal matter. That's not why it exists. Right? This is about the body. Hopefully that addresses the question. I have the questions up here, but I want you to be involved, so you can go ahead and read them.
Okay. All right. Looks like the next question I've come across here is from Samantha. And she asks, what does it mean if someone accuses another of not having the Spirit, but the accused individual actually does?
What does it mean if someone accuses you of not having the Spirit? That says more about them, I think. I mean, ultimately, if you're a believer and the Spirit dwells in you, and somebody says the Spirit of God's not in you, it's a false accusation. And if that also be the case, it probably is demonstrating that they don't have the gift of discernment. Right. Because discernment, you should be able to tell. Now, a fair, I think, claim would be if you're really not demonstrating the works you should be doing, and if the fruits that you're producing aren't the fruits of the Spirit, I mean, that is how you should be able to tell if somebody has the Spirit or not. Mm-hmm. Is the fruit of their life looking like these things? And again, we've started it today, but we'll continue on with those. If you're producing these fruits, that's self-evident, and that's how you should be known. So whether someone accepts that or just makes false accusations or not, that says more about them than it does about the person being accused.
The next question is, how can one diplomatically tell a fellow believer to use self-control Example, not dominate every single minute of a 7-hour visit, ?
How can you tell someone? Well, it's funny because we've been in Galatians so much. This is a good example. Galatians 6:1. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught doing something wrong, you who are directed by the Ruach, restore such a person in a spirit of gentleness, looking closely at yourself so that you are not tempted also. Gentleness, right? That's one of the fruits we should have. As you are directed by the Spirit. So if someone is failing to use self-control, it is our responsibility as brothers and sisters in community. I would advise probably not doing that to a person that you don't know well.
Right.
Just because it may backfire. They may not be accepting of it if, like, well, you don't know me. You don't know what I've been through.
Right.
That might be fair.
Certainly not publicly.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, publicly, yeah. I mean, that's something that you would address with them in private. But the idea is, are they lacking something? Or do they have a problem? Then you should go to them. But the goal should be restoration of that person.
Right, and edification.
And that's the strength of having community and having fellowship, is because you do have the body. I've talked about this a lot over various teachings, and we will continue to talk about it. But that is the strength of community. That's the purpose of community, of fellowship, is being there to bear one another's burdens, which is exactly what Galatians 6:2, the very next verse, is. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the Torah of Messiah. You need brothers and sisters there. None of us know everything, and as well as we know ourselves, none of us even know everything about ourselves. And oftentimes we need others to point things out to us. Like, hey man, you said this the other day, and I don't think you meant it that way, but this is how so-and-so took it. Well, I had no idea. You know? So how, I guess really the question is, how do you diplomatically tell someone to use self-control? Go to them in gentleness and say, hey, just, brother to brother, brother to sister, whatever. This is a pattern that I've noticed. Whether it's whatever the issue is. I guess the example was dominating every single minute of a 7-hour visit. Look, we're supposed to be fellowshipping here. We should be in community. Other people need to be able to talk too.
Right. All right, the next question is, if Scripture says we are either good or bad trees, yet we all struggle with flesh occasionally, how do we actually gauge fruit?
At what point do you consider someone an alcoholic? Is it the person drinks alcohol, or is it that they're drinking all the time and often drunk? I mean,
right.
There's a number of different... Really, it's the same as... And we can go into Hebrews for that, but it's when it becomes a habit.
Right.
Do you have habits that are exhibiting this good fruit? Are you habitually patient, and then every now and then you lose your temper? Then you're probably demonstrating the fruit of patience. Are you generally loving to people, and every now and then you're like, I just can't help that guy today. I just can't do it, right? I mean, that's really what it is. Because remember, and at this point I guess we're going to have to soon go into the gifts of the Spirit, but one of them is discernment, right? God's Spirit works in us and enables us to do these works, and also gifts us with things that we can, number one, do the works, right. And number two, that we can interact with each other. And part of that is a discerning ability. So going back to the person with the false accusation, like I said, they would lack the gift of discernment. So how do you actually gauge fruit? Again, what is that person's habit? What is their general countenance? If they're angry most of the time you see them, then they're lacking in this way. They're not producing that sort of fruit. The Spirit at work in the body of believers is not, God's Spirit at work in us is not going to make us do things contrary to the workings of His Spirit, right? Same thing as God won't tell us to do something that His Word says otherwise, right?
There was something from Jeff. It looks like he was upset that I skipped it by accident here. There's a statement more than anything. It says, one argument I have made against much of the craziness that transpires at charismatic churches, such as writhing on the ground, being, quote, drunk in the Spirit, etc., is that self-control is a fruit of the Spirit, and these things make one lose control of themselves and can't be of the Spirit, as an example. Yeah, I mean, again, Paul talking about
tongues, prophecy, these sorts of things, is in the whole context there is order. That all things may be done in order, right? That things may be done for the building of the edification of the body. If it looks like chaos, that's not how the Spirit works. Now, I didn't hear the second half of that. It just rained. I'm not starting the predestination thing with Jeff online right now. No. Thanks for playing.
No, it's a big
That's true. I'll just mute him. I can do that, right? I'll just mute him. But yeah, the accusation, and generally it's associated with Acts. They said, oh, look at these people, it's the middle of the day, and they're all drunk with wine. The reason that they thought that is because all of these people are speaking, and there's more languages being heard than people speaking, right? Really, the miracle was these people from all over the place are hearing us all in their own language. That was the miracle there. Mm-hmm. And it was because of the Spirit being poured out. They were like, oh, these guys, they must be drunk or something. Being, quote, drunk in the Spirit, as you've seen, I think as most of us have seen, I've mentioned a ministry before that they have a 24-hour prayer room, which is awesome. But there's some really weird things that have happened there too. And when you leave that place of order, it's just like music. Music is orderly. But if it's just somebody standing up and banging a snare drum over and over, not rhythmically, just making ruckus, that's not orderly.
Right.
So the Spirit works self-control. Right. And if we have lost control of self, it's a fair bet that it's not the Spirit's doing. The Spirit most often is the same as Scripture. And Scripture was spoken, God said to the prophet so-and-so, hey, write this down. And the prophet went and wrote it. God didn't possess him, and then he just woke up and said, whoa, look, I've written this thing. Right. God chooses to work in us by empowering us to do the things that he has told us to do.
Certainly our God is a God of order and not confusion. I got one from Katie. It said, do we self-appoint these gifts, or how do we determine which gifts are our, quote, specialty, i.e. teaching, languages?
Yeah, so this is where I think, and again, I keep coming back to it, but I think this is where the community is necessary. Teaching, how do you know that you're supposed to be a teacher? Well, for one is, God's going to equip you God's going to put it in you to be a teacher, and then you should go and get equipped for it, right? But part of that is that God also works in others, because he's working in you, say, hey, you're going to be a teacher, right? So if God says, Aaron, you're going to be a teacher, you say, okay, well, I kind of feel that. Am I really though? But he's also going to work in others, because it's not exclusive to Aaron. He's going to work in others who will affirm that gift in you. Right. You'll have other people that will come to you and say, hey, you know what? You explained this thing the other day, and you did it very well. You're a very gifted teacher. I was told, since I was a child, you're going to be a great teacher one day, and I was like, no, that's not gonna happen. Until people continually kept telling me, hey, you explained that in such a great way. You'd be like a great teacher. I'm not. And then especially when we started up this fellowship here, everybody in agreement, congregationally speaking, that yes, you are a gifted teacher, and you should be up here utilizing that gift. So I think God speaks to us in one way or another, and kind of guides us to seeing what we're gifted to do. And then there's also the other members of the body, the others that have the spirit of discernment, for example, to help us see that as well. And that's why we need other people. We shouldn't be in isolation. The first deficiency ever recognized for humankind was that it is not good for man to be alone. So do we self-appoint it? No.
Right.
No, God gifts people differently according to the Spirit, according to his choice, who gets what. But oftentimes, I think we do need the body in order to discern what is our gift.
Looks like that's all we have for online, unless anyone here has a question.
What? Brian's always got questions. Yep. And even our live streamers know Brian has good questions. See, I'll pray for him. He had to leave. He's not feeling well. All right. My slides is not working again. Much sad. Let's try this one. Okay then.
Jeff asked me to tell you about his persevere comment.
Yeah, I saw it. I chose not to read it. We're not going fishing because I'm not taking the bait. That's a friendly discussion he and I have had many times over the last 7 years.